in talking that.
Oh, that's cool. I
Yep.
didn't know that.
It's got a thing, so it's got a back room, and they get a link to join the back room, and then you can just pull people in from the back room into the main stream.
Oh, cool. Next time I'll check it out. Okay. Well, thanks guys for joining us this afternoon. Welcome. And we're doing, what is this, number 17? Yeah, Smudcast number 17. We're doing another of John or MakeStuff's videos. If you don't know John, he's a friend of the channel. We talked to him for about 4 or 5 hours a few months back. Friendly guy, nice guy, does really quality videos. Very differing opinions, but he's a nice guy about it. And we all got
Hmm.
along. So anything we say to him, don't worry about it. I'm going to chat to him if he said anything negative.
I'm,
We're all friendly here.
I'm
Yeah, no, this
gonna
this
say
is gonna be. Sorry, go on,
for
Shiny.
the
You
stream.
should go ahead.
So I'm kind of wondering what the special effects is going to be about in this video, because for a start it's only a 10-minute long video, and I think that this topic of special effects, especially when it comes to Star Wars, is probably going to be a lot longer than 10 minutes. And
Yeah,
the thing is about Star Wars has been known for its visual effects, mainly because of I'd say the prequels specifically comes to mind because of George Lucas's pushing of what the visual effects could be. So I could understand why George Lucas would be quite integral in visual effects, because he was the man who pushed them. But as far as I can tell, Rian Johnson never pushed you know, any new technology or anything new that hadn't been done before. He pretty much would just say, "Hey, look, hey, I need this effect here. Go do that," and that's Rian Johnson's application to visual effects. Just go make a thing.
Right. So,
yeah.
in case you guys don't know, Shiny is a student of visual effects, whether 3D or animated or otherwise. And Glib is a practitioner of the video industry, I would say, all movies in
Yeah.
general.
I was a junior technician at a reputable special effects company for about a year, studying that, and then I worked briefly for the company that did the visual effects for The Walking Dead. And my next gig, once this stupid virus or whatever goes away, is I'm gonna probably be the liaison for a visual effects office in Los Angeles. So I have a lot of experience with effects, and actually my first experience in the industry was visiting practical effects sets and second unit photography that had to do with miniatures and pyrotechnics and stuff. So this is all the stuff I love to talk about. And my interest in this, just like what Shiny is saying, and what I think the title of the video is I think we're going to get an explanation about how minimalism can be science fiction, epic and such. So I'm interested to see that and have some tales and little things that I can add into it.
I think we could all agree that as poor as we did not enjoy the quality or the poor quality of The Last Jedi, we could all admit it was shot beautifully. It had some really good camera work. It looked great.
Well, again, the camera work was it was very by the book. It wasn't particularly fantastic. It was good, but it could have been a lot better.
Okay, I do not have that discerning an eye, but I did like what I looked at. So it's very simple to the layman to
Yeah,
go
and
colorful.
obviously the visual effects in a Star Wars movie these days by Industrial Lights and Magic is going to look fantastic. Industrial Lights and Magic have, for the most part, always looked pretty brilliant. Every single movie they've done a fantastic job, because they're one of the best in the industry.
Okay, so we
So
could all say this. There's a high level of quality, or at least is very good. So we would have differing opinions on what is good, what is very good, what is great. That sort of range.
There's nothing inherently incompetent about Steve Yedlin's work as a cinematographer, and Rian Johnson and Yedlin actually work well together when they're doing their thing. The question is, does their cinematography match Star Wars? Which is a question for the ages.
Okay. There's a deep question that some of us can't answer because we don't have a knowledge of that,
Of course.
filmmaking.
I wouldn't make a subject. I wouldn't video about a certain subject if I didn't have in-depth knowledge about that subject. And it seems strange to me that, as far as I can tell, John doesn't have any experience in the area of visual effects or much knowledge. I doubt he could put textures into a shader that I've already made for him.
And I don't want to, we don't want to like degrade or be derogatory towards anybody. It's just curious and interesting how
I would never go into I would never make a video about how this house is poorly made if I had absolutely no knowledge about architecture.
Right. Or layman's knowledge. But I am interested in finding out, so.
All right, let's get going.
A pocket watch, open, ticking, swinging from a chain. Held by a young man named Joe in a clearing beside a Kansas cornfield, sky pregnant with rain. Waiting. He checks the watch, removes his earbud headphones, stands. Without much ceremony, a bloodied man in a suit appears from thin air, kneeling before the young man, hands and feet tied, burlap sack over his head, muffled screams gagged. With no hesitation, Joe raises a squat gun and...
What?
Special effects of
So I went
that
to see Jurassic
was
Park
just
in
the
an actual theater
gunshot
for the first time the other
and
day.
the blood pack.
Still the best, but it made me realize how sort of disillusioned I've become with the special effects in modern films. Now, I'm not one of those CGI has gotten worse people. There's always been good and bad CGI, and the good stuff is the best it's ever been. But that's neither here nor there. The big problem with modern special effects...
Well, generally, when technology improves,
Oh,
best
pause
is
it?
going to get better. So it's... I thought it already was paused. It's
No,
at 9:20 for me.
It wasn't on me. Go on.
But, generally, as technology is going to get better, it's kind of a given that the best visual effects are going to get better. And yeah, there has always been good and bad visual effects, but as the technologies became a lot more available, now, a fucking random guy in the middle of nowhere, Yorkshire, in a small town can make visual effects. At least I hope they're decent enough. But the technology just becomes more available as things improve.
There's an interesting inverse quality though, where we have better access to visual effects packages and technology and that kind of stuff, but the application of it isn't necessarily as selective as it should be. There's a lot of there's a dividing line between special effects and visual effects, where special effects are commonly known as things that are in camera, that are physical, and that are happening with the performance, and visual effects are added afterwards. They're digitally created. They are the blue screen replacement and all that kind of stuff. There's common issues.
I know this is just terminology, but like special effects usually, from at least my understanding, special effects will usually be anything which is to apply some kind of illusion to the camera, whether it's practical or digital. But then where it splits off is the digital and practical. So practical is like a real explosion, whereas digital would be a explosion made in Houdini or fume effects or something like that.
When I go to vendors and I'm looking for a blood pack that's going to explode on someone's back, or I'm looking for a cable release that's going to help a car flip, or any kind of door that I want to get blown off the hinges, that's special effects. And if I want to do something that is done with a computer, then I go to a visual effects house, and that's how the business differentiates within itself what the studio does. And what I've known in modern days is that the colloquialism of special effects is being used for all effects. And that's the problem, because that is the underlying issue of the audience's perspective, is that they don't really know how to differentiate. And the people that are creating it may also not know which effects to present and which may be more financially viable. So you have certain in-camera effects that might be cheaper to do, that actually look better, but people might go to the visual effects because they think, oh, technology is this advanced, so let's just use digital. And it ends up being much more expensive than actually just rigging something up. So the knowledge and the wisdom about when to use and apply an effect is part of what makes the cinematic experience timeless. It's what makes the presentation of a movie look like it's cohesively put together when you put all of the elements in it. And that's my major issue with special effects these days, is that it's just improper application and overusage of shortcuts that are actually long cuts to production.
Sounds like you have to actually go to school to learn how to do something, as opposed to just buying a plugin or buying an application and tweaking some knobs.
Well, one of the things is that visual effects is like a whole toolbox full of tools, and each of them are, require a layer of expertise. But when it comes to practical effects, if I have any hot water, that means I have to have a guy on the set with a boiler's license. If I have pyro, he has to have a fire license. Pyrotechnics has its own license. So if you want to be a fully fledged special effects technician, that means you have multiple licenses. You're a man of many hats. The guy that I worked for was a chemist before he did this. So he had all of this background knowledge. We produced all sorts of interesting different breakaway glasses. And we had a glass that you could put on the floor that was actually made out of a rubber material. So you could have your stunt actors on it and it would look like it's actually reflective. We had blood that it was A type and B type blood, like invisible ink. So I could put one layer of the blood on you, and then once I put the other agent on it, it would actually come up as red. So it starts out clear and ends up red. There's so many different layers of special effects and so many different houses and disciplines that are just within that terminology that are underappreciated. And that's why it's interesting to hear people talk about it in such broad and layman's terms, because it's like unearthing something that they have no idea about. Like, I know I'm going off on a tangent, but one of my favorite stories about special effects is if we go back to Poltergeist, which I mentioned earlier. There's a scene where the house gets sucked into the ground, and people are like, "Well, how did they do that?" Because it's real. And I actually found out what they did. The shot of all of the materials being sucked into that little vortex is actually shot in reverse, and underneath the vortex is a shotgun rigged with a special rig, and everything that is that the house has. Oh, sorry, I'm mixing two of them up. My bad. The sucking is a vacuum, and all of the little buildings are a miniature that are rigged with little metal wires so that when the vacuum pulls in, all of the metal collapses exactly how they want it to do. And then the other one with the shotgun had to do with an explosion, where they wanted to do a miniature and they couldn't find a way to have the explosive force, so they used an actual shotgun with shells and pellets and shot it at the camera that was behind the screen. So it's like there's the mechanical, physical side of special effects is one type of brain, and the people that sit behind a computer and do green screen replacement and figure out the mathematics for simulations are a totally different mindset. And then on top of that, there's other people in there that are people that are on the enterprise level that have to do with color grading and all of the digital enterprise data management and color science and all these different sciences that these two parties have to meet up with to create one product. It's the most advanced part of filmmaking. It's the technological aspect, and there's a distinction and a difference, but there's also a unity between the mechanical side of things and the digital side of things, and they both need to exist in the film world for art's sake, not for the sake of economics, which is why all of these special effects movies are so digitally overdone. They all are focused on, what do we think the cheapest thing to do is? Let's send it to Vietnam, let's send it to China, let's send it to India, and we'll just fix it in post. Fix it in post is the hallmark of this era, and it's also the hallmark of hack filmmaking, which is, I feel like, why we are in the state that we are in visually with films.
And that doesn't go just for films. That goes for marketing as well. Any advertisement you see these days, I'd say about 80% of it is special effects.
Visual effects burger, visual effects fries. I've seen breakdowns of these things. It's like when McDonald's ended up showing how they made a CGI, like a trailer for something. But when it comes to, when it comes to the balance, which is what Glib was mostly talking about, there's never one exact way of, if you should do this in visual effects or if you should do this in practical.
Well, can I just interject? Because there are pitfalls of every single type of effect. Yeah. So water doesn't scale in a miniature, for example.
It's all about it's all about what applies best. There's never a perfect solution. It's always what's the best for this choice. And while it either could work, it's just you've got to have someone in there who knows that, okay, this is going to be better for this is going to be better for that, and is a balance, which it's never right to go completely in one. There's no correct answers, only the best answers, and you shouldn't go completely in one direction. I know there is a subsection of people, especially in the Star Wars community, at least it's kind of died down now, but a few years ago it used to be very active about how terrible you should never do CGI. Well, Iron Man's armor is CGI. No, you should do a practical effect, or you should
see,
have a man in actual suit. So
there's specific reasons why it's like Iron Man suits specifically.
I know
Iron Man's armor is practical because it's better to photograph in most of the early films, but the helmet is always digital because when they actually built the helmet and put him in it, his head looked too big. So they had to make this digital helmet that looked like it was proportionally in the size of his armor. But this was what I'm saying is that most effects and most of effects work is not really about creating the effect. It's about masking what the effect isn't. So there's a lot of cases like where you run into something like California law means we can't burn the material that creates black smoke. So you won't see black smoke in a movie that's made in California, even if that's what the scene calls for. Because it's just not allowed. So like
trying to refer to specifically.
But what I'm just saying is that black smoke will usually be digital because of an environmental reason. So it's about workarounds. It's about masking. It's about layering. It's about hiding things. It's magic tricks with visuals. That's the whole point of effects, in my opinion.
Well, what I was trying to say is that as I was referring to, there's no right or wrong answer. There's only the best answer. Is that, and you shouldn't really go in one direction, as I know there are people who believe everything should be CGI, and there are people who legitimately believe that CGI has no place in films and everything should be practical.
It's really cool how it works together. It's really cool because we had stop motion, as everybody knows, where it's like, all right, we'll put the little figure there, then we'll take a frame, then we'll do another figure. And then there was an advancement of that was called Go Motion that was being used for a lot of projects. And that was the original idea for Jurassic Park. But they figured out that they could create the dinosaurs digitally. However, almost all of the work that they did with the physical models was used as references for the digital creatures. Plus, they used actual animal models of other animals that were similar to the dinosaurs to model the walks and all of that. So by the time that they had gotten to the digital part of it, they had done all of this research into how they wanted to photograph these animals, how they would look on camera, and all this stuff. And that experimental time is really important to creating a product that's going to be timeless. That's the number one thing that I'm trying to impose here about effects and quality, is that when you watch a movie and the effect doesn't look like it's aging, that's how you know it's really good. When you go back and you watch an old James Bond movie and they don't have the blood packs because they don't have the system built yet, it looks worse. Characters just, they shoot a character and then they just fall over. Well, we found out that you can put a little metal piece that protects the body. And then if we put a grain of explosives and then cover that with some sort of prosthetic or whatever it is that we're trying to make it look like, we can blow that out and that'll look like a body hit. And that's how we advance to squibs. That's what a squib is, essentially. But in addition to that, they found that you can make squibs that are air powered, and you can have a trigger in your pocket or in your sleeve that'll allow the air that's in a compressed air tank to release a larger spurt of blood. And that was used a lot in Band of Brothers because it means that you don't have to use explosive hits. You can reuse them, and it's easier for that kind of effect. But each effect has a specific look to it. And what we see is so cliche a lot of the times in movies could be easily identifiable if we knew the lexicon for it. So, when you see all those sparks in movies and like Hong Kong action movies, there's just like silver sparks everywhere that look like fireworks. They're just burning magnesium because that's that metal that burns. All the different fireworks metals that you use will burn different colors. So they add all of these flares and things to it based on whatever the taste of the time period is and what people find flashy. But realism and trying to find that realism is that nice mesh, because digital helps mask a lot of physical stuff that we just can't do anymore. If I want to shoot a gun at you at close range, it's probably going to have to be digital at some point, because it's illegal for me to point a gun at you within, I think it's 20 feet with a quarter, half, or full load blank round, because a blank round still ejects some sort of projectile. So every shot that you see with a blank firing firearm is probably off at an angle, and there's all sorts of different circumstances that have to do with that. Like there's something called a suicide load in a gun, and that like if somebody is going to shoot themselves or if someone's going to shoot at close range, they have a gun that the barrel is completely fused closed, so nothing can get out of it. And the load can only be shot once because the gas just gets stuffed into the barrel, and it has to be cleaned almost every time that you use it. So like all these things are thoughts, but when you actually look at all the data, you can see that there's a lot of economic reasons why people would choose to, I'm just going to go and get some muzzle flashes off of the internet. It's way cheaper than if I go and have to pay a $500 or whatever dollar fee plus the armorer's fee to actually get real guns in the project. All of that stuff, plus the ammunition and all this stuff. So I know I went off on a huge tangent, but ultimately what I'm trying to...
That still kind of applies to there is no correct option, there's only the best option, and there's so many things, again, things like price, as you mentioned before, of having to get like a pyrotechnic license when instead you can get someone who just has Maya, or someone who, like an effects studio, who just need to go, hey, look, here's a stock effect that I found in the Maya library, and I can just put that down.
Right.
So it's a lot of factors which go into it, and it's not just about what's going to make the best effects. It's also going to be best for the film.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, and I know we want to move on, but I just wanted to mention something from chat, which is the CGI blood thing drives me crazy, because blood is actually really cheap. And the blood hits are very easy, and there's a lot of different levels that you can buy. There's also a lot of different ways to do bullet hits that people don't really realize. Is there you can get we used to sell this paintball round that was like proprietary, and the different rounds had different things inside them, so we could have like blood or dust or whatever, and a special effects guy would just shoot the wall with a bunch of these clear paintballs, and the hits would look like dust hits from a gun. And that wouldn't require any kind of special license. So there's all sorts of like workarounds and stuff that you can do within your budget. You just have to know which to pick. Don't pick CGI blood. Don't pick CGI water. Don't do this. You know what I mean?
Well, referring to things specifically, again, there are still the better options. So when it comes to blood, real fake blood ends up making a mess. So I can't remember what film it was exactly. I remember talking to one of my media tutors about it, but they mentioned specifically a film, I think it was like Rocky or something, and the reason why they used CGI blood rather than real fake blood was because of things like you had, every time they were going to reshoot this, they had to clean the actor, they had to clean the floors, and that was just a huge mess for everyone to try and clean up this place every single time. So there are applications for like real or visual effects blood over.
That's true, but that to me is like, you want to save a couple minutes, and then your film is going to look bad forever. And I don't abide by that idea, but I understand it. I definitely understand it. The other thing is that these things are really well thought out. Like,
what about things like costumes? So, for example, you might have, how many shirts do you need to get this guy for every time you're going to reshoot this shot? And does it come out at the end? Does it stain?
Well, there are different formulas. That's the cool thing. There's not just one type of staged blood. We had blood, we had the A blood and the B blood, which is a special type, but we had different blood for how old the wound was. We had different like types of blood we had blood that you could consume. You had blood that was easier to get off of certain types of surfaces. So I'm pretty sure that I agree that the blood hits for certain like having different shirts and stuff would be an issue. But like I said, getting stuff on camera and going back to the root of what
it wouldn't
the film.
take
Hold on, just hear me out, because I understand that. Like, let's say like we already know that the costume department on a proper shoot has multiples of something, and then if they get the word for a special effects shot, then they get an extra couple of those for that. And the thing is that I think, and my whole principle here is that film comes from the live action history and principle of acting because it's supposed to be representative of real life. And CGI is not representative of real life. It's representative of what we in our minds categorize as video games and simulations. So when there's too obvious CGI, it brings you out of the real world and into the video game world. And that's why I like everything to be in camera if possible. And obviously,
well, I would make so refer to what you mean specifically about video game in movies. So what you mean by explain that, because I don't quite understand what you mean. Because,
what I mean by video game?
yeah, so you said it takes you out of the movie world and into the video game world.
Well, when I see something that isn't actually there and looks obviously composited there, it changes my suspension of disbelief. It breaks my immersion. If there's something that's too obviously
you're
not
referring to it as you're not referring to it as ruining your immersion. You're referring to it as specifically a video game. And do video games ruin immersion to you in that sense?
No. What I'm saying, look, a video game has a consistent aesthetic. So if there was suddenly like a live action part in a video game, like it was like the 90s with the FMVs, it'd be very jarring for people today because it's a cohesive aesthetic. It's coherent. And films is live action when they don't have there's any CGI in them at all. It's almost a 100% simulacrum or whatever of what it's like to stand there in reality. You just can't smell. It's limited to the medium. So when you mix the two elements together, you can create an uncanny valley effect, like Cats. That's like the ultimate bad version. So if you can make it so that your CGI is convincingly real, people won't process it as CGI. And that's what I'm saying is that there's a giant distinction, like a callus of somebody who's, worked with their hands a lot. In that I think that even the layman can detect when something isn't real and it lowers their immersion points. I don't know how much it is, but I think that it applies across the board.
Okay, guys, I think we've gone off on a tangent long enough.
Yes, I think we've discussed CGI more than John is probably actually going to talk about this subject, or at least we've talked about it in more detail than I expect this video to talk about.
Let's actually get to the John's video so we can keep going here.
Sure.
It's magic. I think a lot of the creativity and personality of modern effects have been replaced by excess. Throw a ton of something, anything on the screen, and boom, there's your set piece. Which can totally work. I mean, but excess can be desensitizing when it comes to an effect's magicness, which is exactly why I'm so fascinated by the stripped-down special effects of writer-director Rian Johnson. Johnson has a very...
Okay, just looking at, Star Wars Last Jedi, there is not much minimal about the special effects they've used. In fact, I would say that in almost every shot, there is some kind of visual effects being used. Everything, Luke, the throne room fight, to the Luke and Kylo, to how, just them on a fucking ship when there's something in the background. There's going to be lots of visual effects. And even then, even on shots which you wouldn't really think would usually have visual effects, there could be small things. I'll use an example of Shazam. So during Shazam and the scene with the mall, there's lots of little visual effects which are being used to hide camera equipment and people who are just standing around the shot who really shouldn't have been standing around the shot. And you don't notice that because visual effects by their very design are not designed to be noticed. So there's going to be effects in almost every shot, and I would say Rian Johnson is in no way reserved in his use of them, or the way he tells people to use them.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty accurate.
Ever old school. 3 projects come to mind when I think of Rian Johnson and Sci-Fi. But before we dive into those, a quick, massive shout out to the director of photography on all 3 of these projects, Steve Yedlin. He's a genius. Anyway.
Well, I think that's way overstating his capability.
Looper is about time travel. Usually when I think time travel, I think light bending, sparks flying, flaming tire tracks, but in Looper, the time travel is, well, without much ceremony. Which makes sense practically, it's a low-budget film, but it also makes perfect sense for the world.
I don't understand. Is this unique?
to him, because he thinks of time travel in other videos or other movies as being a big spectacle, to him it's just a composite. Boom, there's another guy in the set. Because
Has he seen Twilight Zone?
Apparently not. The
Okay.
originals.
But you know what? I don't know.
There's the
Okay.
time tunnel. There's all sorts of historical examples of time travel. Yes, I know. So,
But even then, like the presentation of that wasn't very sci-fi excessive.
yeah, I know.
Like,
I'll be honest, I've never seen Looper, and the actions of Rian Johnson in his other film tends to make me not really care to watch it.
I liked Brick. I was a big fan of Brick when I was growing up. So I thought, I thought maybe he would be a pretty good director. I didn't like Looper. I thought the story was pretty poorly put together. But I just wanted to comment on that because I thought that was kind of out of place. It seems like he wants to say something great about it. You know, he's saying Steve Yedlin's a genius. He loves it, but I'm waiting for something to back up his statement.
Here's a super
That's all I
chat
had to
from
say.
Tyler Preston. Thank you, sir. Hello, Jack Saint and Patricia Taxon Stream responding to Smudboy's podcast on Patty Chan. And they weren't happy. Very salty.
Oh, we know.
I
Me and LiteratureDevil both had a peek in on the stream, and the point I didn't jump in there for long because I think it was rather late for me, but I just jumped in to have a look, and almost immediately I was just met with a huge straw man. So I think it was one of us, probably me. I didn't quite hear what they were talking about exactly, but they referred to something as, okay, so these people believe that if you can't see something, then it makes it bad. It's like, well, yes, in a visual medium, you need to be able to see information because that's where a lot of information is coming from. But then they take it to, oh, so that means radio dramas are bad. It's like, no, because that's not a visual medium. Oh, and then they say, oh, what about parts where you don't get a lot of information on the screen? Like in The Lion King, you don't see the death of Mufasa. You end up seeing the reaction. It's like that's not the same fucking thing. I was like, I think one of us at least was talking about not being able to see something in a visual medium.
I don't think we want to jump into that discussion. I didn't even know it was taking place. I never saw it. I never heard it.
Yeah.
I personally
Well,
don't
I
care.
posted it in the
Me neither.
DM.
I thought it was just entertaining that they did it because it showed that they cared.
Even though they said they were done talking. Yeah, I know. Anyway, this is a video about John and his wonderful topic about special effects and Rian Johnson. Let's get back on that. Thanks for the question or the comments.
Oh, we love you, John. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Looper's setting and story is grounded and gritty, which is only reinforced and heightened by that lack of spectacle. The time travel in Looper is as blunt and impactful as its blunderbusses. Star Wars.
Okay, so I don't know if have either you seen Looper to qualify that the impact of time travel is about the same as blunderbusses?
Well, it's interesting to me that I understand what he's trying to marvel at. The way that it works is that people just pop into the frame. It's like the most basic form of a special effect. So I understand what he's getting at. He likes that it's a non-effect, that suddenly someone just pops into existence, and that's what time travel looks like. And then there is a device that's a time travel device, but it kind of looks like a furnace or a boiler. It looks unimpressive. So if you like this, it's right in line with Ryan subverting things. It's just what he does, apparently.
I would say that there's not really much of a problem with someone time traveling popping because it's well minimalist. I think it could work fine, but like a time machine being a boiler or a furnace.
Well, yeah, generally when you're talking about technology, the more details you have, the more believable something is when you have lots of doodads, lights, dials, that sort of thing. But then you have to talk about technology being so advanced, there's really no difference between efficiency and, well, how good can time travel get? Like, does it take, you have to rip open some tear in space-time? Do you have to have all these special effects? Or you just snap your fingers and boom, you're there? So,
I would say the snapping thing is boom, you're there would actually make it seem more advanced. If there's no fast or, you just kind of, you don't have to go into a DeLorean and go 88 miles an hour. You don't have to rip open this hole in time and walk through it. You legit just go, oh, look, I'm here.
right.
And
Yeah,
that make
But
it
we
more fast.
remember going 88 miles an hour because there's something special about putting that caveat into the story that makes it so that there's more tension. It's fun, and that's part of the special effects. That's part of what he was saying. The magic is showing off. I mean, if we're not showing off a special effect, then we're doing a bad job. Even if it's realistic, we want to spotlight the impact of something, even if it's very minimalistic. And he does that. Like Yedlin, the way that it's framed when the character pops in. It makes sense. Everything is good, but it's not spectacular. And that's why I don't understand the praise for it, because nobody outside of Rian Johnson fans remembers Looper. They remember Terminator, and Terminator had the cool ball thing, the sphere with the lightning, and that's what sticks out in your mind because movies are spectacle. So why do we not want to have a spectacle? I understand being kind of like reserved about things, but can you be spectacularly reserved, like in Bruges or something? That's all. I don't know.
See, I thought we were talking about science fiction as a medium for storytelling. What kind of what kind of time travel? What kind of technique is it? Is it absolutist? So it's
like referring to time travel
wait.
specifically.
You interrupted Smut. Were you done there, Smut? I didn't understand what you.
Well, someone wanted to talk. Was it you or?
Shiney did, but I wanted to hold that thought then.
Yeah,
Go on, Shiney.
I was just about to say, I've been trying to set this for a little while, so I'll try to split in, sorry. When it comes to time travel effects specifically, we're referring to what Glib was saying, it's that movies are spectacle and we remember these things. It is fine to have, you just popping in the middle of, it's like that's time travel. That's fine. But it is better to make it more memorable, I think. To have the DeLorean go 88 miles an hour and that impactful moment is what's going to make the movie resonate a lot more with your audience rather than just having the pop. So while it's fine, it's I don't have a problem with it. There's some things you can do. Again, there's no right or wrong options really. There's only the best option, and the better option usually is to have these flashy effects.
Well, I would say based off the context of the story. So in Back to the Future, that is a story about time. Like they just discovered time travel. It works. It's not perfect. It's a raw technology that they just discovered. And in Looper, it's like this is a common thing. Everyone does it, or it's highly controlled. It's highly refined. So you're not going to get all these special effects. You're not going to get all these things. And if that makes sense within the world that they're telling, then great. So is the detail necessary for the believability of the scene? Yes or no?
I think he accomplishes in Looper. He accomplishes everything that he needs to. But the question is, do you want a passing grade or do you want to be impressive?
I see. Okay.
And I get what you're saying. Because I wanted to comment earlier. You were saying the story is the root of it, which is the truth. And then the special effect is supposed to be an assistance to the story. So if you have a more detailed story, if you have more going on, then obviously the tech that you're detailing and the aesthetics that you're presenting are going to have more going on too. So his minimalism could also be seen as a lack of artistry.
Exactly.
And that's a problem.
Yeah. So there's plenty of science fiction stories out there. I always refer to the romance one. It's basically a romance story, but it's the time traveler's wife. It's a novella.
Yeah. And I remember that one.
Yeah, there's nothing special about this guy time traveling. He just goes pop and he's there. And that's fine because it's not about a story about a guy going through time and feeling and being able to control things because time is immutable. You can't alter the past.
I heard this saying
an idea I've had.
Okay, go on.
Again.
Yeah.
So what I was just kind of thinking about what I would do in that sense. One thing that kind of popped into mind was, I suppose, something which is quite similar in a sense to what other time travel movies have done. So I would have had a silhouette, and this kind of still serves the same purpose of fitting into Looper as time travel is a lot more refined. You'd have like a flash of like a white, like you have the white outlet of the silhouette of the person, and that would be glowing, and then it would kind of use some kind of Fresnel or inner glow to slowly reveal, to remove that white glow to slowly reveal or quite fastly remove the person. And that would have still, I think that would have been better than just having them pop in, but popping them in is still just a pass grade, I would say.
We like
This
to
is
have
referring
a
to what you talked
visual.
before.
We
Mhm.
like to have a visual component when we're in a visual medium to signify that something is happening, even if it's just a red light going green. But that's bare minimum again. So it's more fun to layer in more sequencing and have fun with the technology and a little bit of banter between the characters and a level of stakes when anything is happening.
Right.
And unfortunately, Looper is not logical. It doesn't make any sense. There's a plot point that has to do with how the major motivation for the story is that you can't murder people in the future because there's too much tracking and all that stuff. So the only way that they can murder people, because the gangs are like in the business of doing that, is to send them back to the past where they can be murdered. But it's stupid because in the beginning of the movie, the inciting incident is that the wife gets killed in the future. So apparently you can kill people in the future. So it's like the story doesn't really hold up. And then you don't get a special effects spectacle. So you're in trouble from that point on.
It also
Because
has to do
then-
with, yeah, you're right. It has to do with the
An effect like that,
Hold
popping
on.
in.
Smud was saying something. What were you
Sorry,
saying?
Yeah,
I
about-
won't say anything.
the concept of hard and soft science fiction, where if you had a more hardcore sci-fi story, you would need all this detail. You would need all this exposition on explaining time travel, how it works, why it works the way it does, on top of the society it comes from. So you say, okay, we can't kill people in the future or in the past. Whereas a story that's not focused on that, that's why The Time Traveler's Wife is a soft sci-fi story, because they don't care so much about time travel. It's an afterthought. It's like, yeah, make sure it's immutable. There's no arguments against paradoxes and stuff like that. Fine. Boom, the guy just pops in and out. That's how it works. So we
Well,
don't.
it's funny that you say that because that's what Ryan was trying to do. He was trying to be influenced by Terminator and go, I want to introduce the time travel thing and then I want to get it out of the way so that I
Yeah.
can go into the story. And the problem is that he didn't do enough building to make it make
Exactly,
sense
yeah.
before he clicked the trigger on, I'm going to keep writing this. He didn't work out the major issues with it. I have a time travel story that I've been stuck on in one part just because I have one major question that needs to be answered. If I just pushed on, it'd be crash the entire program. But some people just have to keep going, you know?
Like if I was going to say the effect that is used, that the pop-in effect, would, to me, that seems more like something which would be used in some kind of cheap, it's like some kind of comedy that isn't trying to be as serious, which is maybe trying to take the piss out of something, would usually not really be able to afford this effect, and they would also use to their advantage of, because in a sense, someone just popping out of thin air is a bit silly. That's something that doesn't really happen. It's not quite logical to have, nothing be there and then suddenly something's there without any kind of visual change. So it doesn't seem like it would, while again passable, it doesn't seem like it would fit a serious science fiction story.
That's all about fiction, and fiction is all about speculation when it comes to science fiction.
I remember,
So,
remember Star Trek, the original one with the city on the edge of forever? You have this giant
Mm-hmm.
portal, and everyone goes through it, and the screen gets whizzy and foozy, and all of a sudden they're on the other side of the universe, and they're in 1940s, or was it 30s America? I can't remember the exact spot, but like it's a whole thing. It's a whole production that to showcase that something weird is happening. But with Looper, I guess it's not that big a deal. That's not the focus of the story. Or at least
right.
it shouldn't be.
And that's the intention. So it is doing what it sets out to do, but I'm curious about why it's so negligent to
Why is
aid.
it a good thing? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, me too. So we'll find out.
Episode 8, The Last Jedi, brought Johnson's minimalist effects to the mainstream blockbuster. Oh? You didn't like The Last...
Okay, that's definitely a jab at Mauler. It's Mauler's profile picture that's been blurred out, and it's Darth Maul.
I don't think this is his actual comment. I think this is a joke that John has made, and he's just writing out.
Yeah,
I think so too.
I agree, but I think it is still a jab at Mauler. It's obviously a jab at Mauler, even if it's a.
Okay, we're gonna skip it because obviously it's a joke. So.
Well, Mauler would never ever say, like, I have used facts and logic to determine that TLJ is universally unlovable, because loving something is obviously has nothing to do with anything when it comes to the quality of something. So yeah, obviously it's not his actual comment.
But he would just never. That's not his character, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Last Jedi? You know, actually, your criticisms are fascinating to me. I've never heard any of them 1,000 times already, and this, of course,
Is
the
he
perfect
gonna
place
lead
to
the
air your
comment?
grievances because I, a total
No,
stranger,
no,
really,
no,
truly
don't
care
do
about
it.
how much you, a total stranger, disliked this 2-year-old film.
See, John wants his positive space that you have to respect.
Okay, this is my big problem with John. Like, again, I'm fine with him as a person, but policing your comments to this extent it seems so awful to me. And I tried to bring it up, and he seemed very adamant about not having. He says the main reason why he didn't have the comments was because he heard them before, but that doesn't seem. Is that really a problem? I've heard something before, therefore I'm going to remove your comment.
This is how John wishes to treat his YouTube channel. He has every right to do that. That's his choice. So
I'm just reading all of these.
You don't even have
things
to
that
say
are-
anything.
Well, hold on a second. Something that I run into all the time is that when people are defending The Last Jedi, they then have to go attack the original trilogy because they're saying, well, you're not holding the same standard. And like all these comments, like it makes no sense to hide Luke on Anakin's home planet and all that kind of stuff. Like, I'm sure that that is an issue, and I agree. Now what? Now that we but let's say that that's true. So does that mean that the people that are saying these things about a New Hope don't like A New Hope? Because all of my arguments about The Last Jedi are about why it's bad or why it's bad and why I don't like it. So what is the point that is trying to be made here other than whataboutism?
The two things to bring up, obviously, is what about it, as you were just about to say, as I was trying to say. And the other thing is that, so obviously about the whataboutism, is that these two problems have pretty much nothing to do with each other. You're just bringing up a problem in the original trilogy. And I would say it wasn't necessarily a problem because you're giving Anakin, obviously, or Vader at this point, isn't going to return to his family and check if Luke's there. He's probably going to leave his past behind and just continue, and he hates Tatooine, so why would he go back there? So in my expect, that's fine for me, but I can understand how other people might interpret that as being a little bit stupid.
Well, some of these just aren't even like accurate. That's the thing. It's like the one at the bottom. Sorry, go on.
Because it's a joke, I think we're not supposed to take it seriously, and he's just.
I don't know. These sound like real arguments. Like seriously, like what does it say? It says, sure, it makes sense that sure Obi-Wan says Anakin can't win because he has Darth Maul had the high ground over. And sure, Yoda, right?
You're looking at a different
that point doesn't
than me.
That point is
I'm currently on 326. I don't see that.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm looking at the comment, and the comment is like saying this stuff, and I understand that's probably something that is in his mind that he's projecting onto the straw man argument as a joke. So I understand every step of the way, but I think that this is these sound like legitimate arguments against the OT from somebody. And I just find it interesting because like some of those you could shoo away easily. Like the move that Obi-Wan does to defeat Darth Maul is the exact same move that Anakin does. So obviously Obi-Wan would see it coming. So it's like an invalid statement. But then there's stuff like where did they get Leia's dress on in Return of the Jedi? It's like, I don't know. How close is that to the Holdo maneuver in terms of it?
I still affirm this is supposed to be a joke, and even if
we'll go with that.
Well, no, even if we argue this, he's not going to change his mind regardless. So
that's fine.
There's really no point to it. Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that.
Fascinating. The algorithm thanks you for your comment. Johnson does lean towards more contemporary excessive effects here and there. It is, after all, a massive franchise.
Yeah, no visual effects here. It's all minimal. A TIE fighter falling from the roof and crashing down and exploding. These sections here where you got the retarded speed of things going about. You've got the salt sand being thrust up into the air. Not all this is very minimal. I respect that for being minimal. Of course.
when Luke was shot by those AT-ATs. When
Minimal effects.
hold a maneuver. But this is the same argumentation I heard from Patrick Willems when I was doing my response to him, where it's like they'll make a statement and then they'll be like, it's always like this, except when it's not. And you're like, well, then your statement is invalid.
Yeah.
Easy.
Film, and like I said, excess does not automatically equal bad. But still, there are
Okay, so it doesn't equal bad, but minimalism is good. Okay.
Well, isn't excess implying something like there's too much? So if there is too much of something, then you're saying that's a negative.
Sure, but we can agree just because you have a
No, but
actual
if he's
depiction-
saying something is excessive, I'm not saying here is this shot here in terms of visual effects is bad, but he's saying that something that is excessive isn't necessarily bad, even though if you're saying something is excessive, you're usually referring to it as a negative because having too much of something is a negative.
Well, sometimes it's fun
Or
to
at
be
least
a
you're
little
applying it to
excessive.
negative.
It's occasional. You know what I mean? It's fun. Sometimes it's fun to overdo something just for the sake of it. But that's not.
Yeah, he's not disregarding the fact that it can.
Well, no, but if it's not retracting from the quality, then it's not excessive, is it? It's not too much.
You can have a lot of something which is good, provided it makes sense. Provided you have like a scene like the chase scene. There's all these ships. They're all chasing after the Radis, and there's all these other ships that are being destroyed. So that's a big busy scene. So you need something crazy and action packed. So I think John is saying, yeah, it doesn't just because you have a long shot or a shot with lots of stuff in it doesn't mean it's gonna be a bad shot. I agree. That's fine.
Yeah.
breathtaking moments of minimalist effects. I'm sure one
Give us
immediately comes to
examples.
mind.
Yeah. Let's go.
That's not minimalistic at all. What the fuck are you on about?
That's like a Dragon Ball Z hit.
That is one of the excessive moments. A fucking mega Star Destroyer being ripped in half and ripping the rest of the fleet in half while ripping that in half. That is excessive.
It's
Don't-
minimalistic because it goes quiet for a second.
But that's minimalistic in sound, not minimalistic in effect.
Yeah, if you look at that right now, the thousands, if not millions, of little particles or objects that CGI had to come up with to make that look right. Lots of rendering time, lots and lots of video takes to get that right.
Hey, that's funny. Just as a point of reference, because you said you liked Babylon 5, I have a little Babylon 5 special effects anecdote. You remember the fighter scenes from that where there was all CGI?
Yeah, for sure.
My dad was telling me that he was involved in the process of doing that, and they had a whole room that was filled with computers just to render that sequence, and it took 24 hours just to render like a minute or so of it. And it was so hot in the room that they had to install extra air conditioning units into it to keep it cool.
that was-
the whole room had to be air
That was
cooled.
back in the day before they even had SGI workstations, I believe.
Yeah. So it's,
yeah, one day
Yeah,
is
so
pretty
it's-
good.
And,
Isn't that
and
great?
now, like I have a computer here that can render, what about every 7 hours it can render 1 minute of footage using Redshift.
Really? That's not bad.
So like
yeah,
the
it's ridiculous
technology
now.
has improved so much. And then again, it's Redshift, which is a GPU rendering software rather than a CPU rendering software. And the thing is about a GPU rendering software, it uses a lot of the same technology of video game. You know how video games have the graphics live rendered. So
Yeah.
it uses a lot of the same principles to try and speed it up while also being able to do things like volumetric effects, which were the huge advantage of using CPU renders.
Yeah, there's some Unreal Engine live rendering
Oh,
methods
yeah.
that are used now in studios for live action, which is amazing.
Well, from what I've seen, The Mandalorian, they didn't use it for the final effect, but they used it for things like lighting and so they would have this giant screen around the actors. I don't know how they ended up replacing it with the actual effect in the end. Probably something to do with you having if you have the same image so on the back and on the front, you can use AI to remove it manually. And or not but the AI.
What are you talking about? You're talking about like background replacement, or are you talking about characters being replaced?
No, I'm talking about replacing the background because the computer-generated image and the image on the screen that's being live rendered probably you can maybe do something with an AI to get rid of that, but they would
I'll tell you. There's a method of filming different perspectives of an external location. Then you composite that image into a 3D image, and then that 3D image can be applied to any perspective that you apply in the real world. It can be mapped. So now we have 3D.
No, but have you seen the what I'm referring to specifically is in The Mandalorian when they didn't have sets that are quite similar to how you'd have sets usually in a film. They had this giant almost 360-degree screen, and that was using Unreal Engine, and wherever the camera moved, it would create the live image of the graphic, and it would also help with things like lighting when it comes to, because obviously lighting is a fucking pain in the ass, and it's very difficult for compositing.
Lighting is the biggest issue. You've got to matching the CGI and the real world. It's almost impossible.
That is using the live generated images from the screen creates this almost perfect lighting, which is honestly what I'm most excited for this technology. But what I'm not quite as sure on is how they got rid of the temporary rendered visual effects, because obviously the camera would be recording it, because the camera is recording the.
Talking about the pre-visualizations, the stuff that's like the temporary stuff. Yeah, that's previs, so that it's temporary, like a sketch compared to an actual one. And then if you want,
I'll see if I can find one.
So we can all agree here. This is not an example of minimalism, right?
Yeah. Sorry about that tangent, but yeah.
Okay. Just so we're on the same page, because I looked at it, I was like, "What are you talking about, John?" This
is mega effect. This is all about big.
Even a massive spectacle moment like this is stripped of most of its color and all of its audio. That is until the big effect. But the effect that impressed me most was the force bond between Kylo and Rey.
Okay, this is where I'm a little confused here.
What the fuck is he on about? Okay, so he's
just easily impressed. So he's like, oh my god, it's so minimalistic because nothing's happening. And then, oh my god, something's happening. It's like, those two things are not, you can't put those two things together in that way. They're not separate.
What effects would there have been? No, but what effect would there have been to try and, other than showing these two people obviously sensing each other, what else would you do? Would you have had a fucking portal rip out?
No, I'm talking about the previous effect.
Ripped out of the world and they could see each other. What does he expect?
Right. And it's all about context. Again, when we see one spaceship ram into another spaceship, you expect a massive explosion, and you get something a little different. It's kind of like this strange lightning effect, but it's still amazing CGI. There's all this little details here and there.
Well, it's a big buildup because the silence is the silence before the big explosion. So if they had built up with all these violins, this tense moment, instead of cutting it out, it would have almost had the same effect, but it would have been a different presentation. I don't understand how these two decisions are not part of the same process. You're trying to build up to the biggest explosion in all of the movie. It's the biggest effect. So it has to be a spectacle. Right. The preceding element doesn't make it minimalistic as a whole. It's a juxtaposition, and that's what you're excited for. That's what build-ups and drops in music are about. And that's what this is.
And in this example, there's literally no effect aside from cutting between scenes and them having a conversation as if they were in the same room. But we don't understand the context until we get to the throne room.
I would say it's established. It's already established that when... So when you think back to Empire Strikes Back, you have Luke and you have Vader sensing each other, and you just see them kind of their reaction to sensing each other, and that's established. That's not minimalistic because there is literally nothing else you could do to try and show the bond unless you're gonna.
No, you could do a lot.
Crazy and say what I think it is minimalistic. Could you do?
I think it is minimalistic, but ascribing something that George invented to Rian is inaccurate. If he's just copying what George did, then he's not. There's nothing to be said about his style. It's just that he's doing the exact same thing.
Only this time they're having an actual conversation. They could transfer their moisture between hands. I guess I don't know.
Can we just go back to the shot? So, Glib, what else do you think they could have done to show the connection between, say, back in Empire Strikes? how could we have
not talking
visual
about
effects
canon.
to show the? No,
They
no,
could be in
no.
the same. They could be in an imaginary place. They could be seeing
Okay.
each other in a dream world. They could be phasing in and out of their own realities with the same room as each other. They could be standing in the same room as each other, like it is in The Rise of Skywalker. There's a lot of different options, but
that
George
would
wanted it
require
to be
them
as if they
to-
were speaking distantly to each other. They look in the original version of this. They look out. They don't look like they're looking at a person. They look like they're looking at the horizon, which gives us the idea that it's taking place at a great distance. And as we know, it is taking place at a great distance. And it's a connection between family members. And this one, it's totally like what Smud said. It's without context. They changed the canon lore by having the water droplets and the dice and all this shit that disappears and the hand doesn't disappear or whatever. It's so the hand does disappear. It's just there's a whole bunch of stupid logical inconsistencies.
Right, and that's
But effect wise, they could have done more because they've broken lore, or they could have reeled it back in. It has nothing to do with Rian Johnson's special effects.
And then we
Minimal.
learn the reason why this happens is Snoke did this, but he didn't tell that to anyone. He didn't say, "Hey, Kylo, I want you to talk to Rey and figure out where Luke is. Can you do that for me?" Like, he didn't give Kylo any guidance that, by the way, I'm doing this.
That would have made sense, wouldn't it? To have, hey, Kylo, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to initiate this connection, and I need you to try and figure out, where they are by using this. And so he just doesn't tell him. It's like, hey, look, I'm going to create this connection, lol.
So even when we learn of it, we're like, do you even know why you did this aside from the laughs? Like, what was the point of having this random event happen 3 times just to freak them out and then have them question each other and then, haha, I have fooled you all. I've done this because I wanted you to. And then I'm going to kill you and find Luke and kill him. It's like, what? You don't know where Luke is yet. How are you going to figure this out, buddy? Like, all these dumb things that do not account for this behavior. Never mind the effect itself.
I just scrubbed over the video that Shiney was talking about, this virtual production thing. It's what it is they go to a location and they take a 3D video of something so that you get like a full panoramic video thing, and then they have the inverse
like
of that as this.
It's a dome light, basically. But
it could be a dome camera, or it could just be individual images that are stick.
What they're doing there is generating using was it like a game engine, which was Unreal Engine?
No, but hold on, listen to what I'm saying.
They were using to live render the.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is that if they have a real reference, what they do is they go to a space with a second unit team, and then they take all of the video footage that they would need for the space that they want on the stage, and then they have this stage that has a surround image that can be partitioned off for where they want to place the camera, and then they can project like a green screen or a rear screen projection back in the old days in real time the image, and if they want they can swap it out again. But I think what they do is they keep the image, and I think what they're doing is they're just using certain types of matching numbers that have to do with where the original source image was, that's the environment, and matching that to the camera and the lighting settings in the studio. I've seen other versions of this done before at the place that I used to work at. Anyway.
Let's keep going.
Galaxy of holograms and force ghosts, there's nothing more striking than just shot, reverse shot, shot, reverse shot. These scenes are all about...
It's amazing, though.
There's nothing more striking than shot, reverse shot, apparently.
No, it's not. I mean, maybe, sure. Anything can be striking if it strikes you.
But it's surely there's more that goes into.
Well, it's just like praising normal filmmaking. That's what's so weird to me. It's like, imagine if I went into a beginner's filmmaking thing and they're like, hey man, I want to make films like this person or this person. And I went, you know what is really striking? Shot, reverse shot. It'd be the most asinine way to teach it. You go in there and you say, basically everything ends up being shot, reverse shot. And then you figure out what you want to do. Do you want to put the camera in another place? Alter that shot? What's your style version? Like Mr. Robot, they do something that's specific to it that's not like any other, which is they use the 16:9 aspect ratio, but then they block the characters where they might be super far in a corner or there might be a lot of headroom, and it gives you a feeling of anxiety and unease, just like the characters. There's like all these different techniques. Shot, reverse shot is the first thing that you do. It's day one stuff. It's what people walk in the doors knowing. So I'm confused about that.
No, Glib, you get a pat on the back for using a fucking camera. Like, you use sound effects, you get a pat on the back for that as well.
I once loaded up After Effects.
Oh my
I
god!
saved and exported a video.
You see, I ended up using a fractal noise to generate something, and it did the thing.
I'm a scientist.
Building this human-to-human connection between them. And what better way to do that than to have them just talk human-to-human? No wispy telekinetic voiceover or glowing translucent projections to distract you from that connection. It's intimate, vulnerable.
It's super contrived. We don't
Oh, that
understand a
is-
thing.
Oh, that is so bad because he's like talking shit about the Force ghosts, and it's like clearly the only reason why they're translucent is so that you know that he's not back. He's not alive. He didn't come back from the dead. He's dead, but he's coming back to invoke spiritual wisdom because we like this character. That's the reason. So talking shit about an effect that is there for a story reason is stupid. I don't know what
I
else
think
I
I
can
might be
say.
out of sync for you again because at the moment I'm seeing it's human for Kylo to be there, but for the shot reverse shot.
434.
Oh, I must be off. I keep getting desynced. Let me try that again.
But yeah, when it comes to like visual effects can also kind of convey information. For example, if someone is transparent, that kind of implies that they're not really there. So again, in a visual medium, it can apply a lot, and that's one of the things I talked about or mentioned briefly on the last stream. Was that one thing about film is that you can fit a lot more information on a screen because of certain things. You don't need to say this person was transparent. You can just have them be transparent, or you can, say certain things about someone just from the look on their face, and you don't need to go into detail about what they're thinking that moment, like a book would usually do. Without going into the complexities of different mediums.
But isn't
Why
the
don't they just act? Sorry.
Isn't the
Go on.
explanation in episode 9 that they're now a Force dyad makes so much more sense that, before it was Snoke, now it's just because they can do it, even though they don't want to do it?
Because the wonderful things they does.
Well, one of my favorite things about the Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back idea was that these people are not just Jedi, they can communicate because they're also family. There's a deeper connection there. And there's not really a deep connection here, and I don't understand why this conversation had to take place far away from each other. They could have had this conversation. Well, hold on a second. But if he really wanted human interaction, they didn't need to use the Force.
I would say it's not necessarily family in like connection, but in a sense it is. But it's generally just connection in general. So, for example, I would give an example of say a master trying to. People in the comments probably know what the fuck I'm talking about, but the connection between a master and apprentice, someone who I would say in a sense are pretty much family because they've been raised by this person, would also have a strong connection. People who have been friends or been together for a long time would have a connection. It's not just family.
Whoever has a connection in the original trilogy, it's mostly between the family members. I mean, that's the data that I extrapolated. It may you can interpret it however you want, but in the prequels they don't really use that method because it's inconvenient to the storytelling if they can just discuss things with each other via the Force, then they don't need communicators, and that's a major plot point in those movies. So it made sense to me that the connection was so strong between these individuals that they could communicate through the Force.
Right.
When other connections, it doesn't work the same.
In the original series, the whole point was that Luke was trying to connect with his dad, but Leia could also feel that as well, and that was the point of the story, that Luke wanted to save his dad. In The Last Jedi, imagine they just had walkie-talkies or something, and they were talking long distances. You would have the same effect. They'd still be talking to each other. They'd still have the same conversation. They wouldn't be looking at each other, but they'd still be talking. So we could have the same conversation. Imagine if Snoke was not a Sith Lord. He was just a guy. I have Rey's contact information. I want you to call her every 20 minutes. And you're like, okay, I'll do that, Lord. And the scenes would still play out. So you don't need all these contrived scenarios to have the same effect of They're talking like humans. It's like, yes, that's how people talk. Yes, okay.
Yeah, exactly. It's obvious.
No, they talk like humans, therefore you deserve a fucking pat on the back. You did your job. You did a pass, and because you got a pass, you deserve a merit.
So give this man his Star Wars trilogy. I swear to God.
Okay. Because of his minimal approach to effect, I'm using minimal approach in quotation marks here because we're talking about the last. There is no minimal approach to visual effects in that fucking film.
Remember the minimal approach to effects with Canto Bight? Remember how quick and easy that was to do?
Oh yeah, the amount of money that was fucking spent on Canto Bight. They didn't even need all these crazy fucking these crazy nonsensical aliens which we have never seen before. They could have just had people in that fucking place, and it would have made it so much more cheaper. And that would have been more minimal.
I just don't understand why he likes it so much. It just seems so illogical to me. Seems like. Sorry, go on.
He spent so much money on practical and special effects, and the effects were what? A milking sea moose, an unnecessary whole planet scene on Canto Bight, a really spectacular explosion in space. I'll give him that. But
that was cool.
But none of it was minimal. I don't know where he's coming
getting
from.
blown out of an airlock and then flying Superman style back in through space is pretty high spectacle to me.
Yeah,
even for Star Wars. Something that I've noted about these videos that really started to bother me is that by making all of these statements about how great this thing is, it makes all of the other things sound lesser. But there's no argument for why this stuff is so great. And that's what activates my anger, because it's like you're making all of these statements, you don't have the facts to back it up, and you don't have the opinion or the wisdom to understand what's going on. And then by extent, it makes it sound like, wow, Ryan's a genius for doing what other people aren't doing. But everybody's doing what Ryan's doing. Ryan's doing the bare minimum. So why are we praising it?
Yeah.
What is the praise? I'm so confused. Just stop with the snark, stop taking shots at people, and just tell me what it is that's so great about this. Or don't make a video because you're talking out of your ass.
I'm confused mostly because he's saying that the minimalist approach is like it's somehow good. And I'll say, okay, well, could you maybe tell us how being minimal of the visual effects are good? But it's not really that well explained. Does it have a better visual impact on us, the viewer, in a visual medium? Well, he hasn't explained. Does it, I don't know, make it better and cheaper for the movie so they can instead spend the money in other places? He hasn't said that at all. But actually, I would say that's probably a bonus of minimalistic effects, because it means you can have better places to spend the money.
But he doesn't have any examples of any other director making any minimalistic effects. He doesn't even address it within the series of Star Wars. I mean, again, George was the one that made a lot of these effects not over the top. He's the one that made it so that there weren't any flashbacks during stories. He's the one that made the Force something that you interpreted through the characters' interactions with the world. It's just Luke holding his hand out and his facial expressions and then an effect. It's all minimal. Star Wars is not like, if you want maximal effect, look at something like an anime and how it's all jumping around and all these screen effects and things are just over the top. A lot of Asian cinema, Hong Kong action, super spectacle. And it's like, we are not giving credit to anybody in Star Wars previously. He hasn't given credit to anybody outside of what Rian Johnson has done. He hasn't named any special effects artists. He hasn't talked about any studios that were involved in this. He hasn't made any references. So this is very disappointing. And
as I was trying to just say, I've lost my trail of thought now. Okay, so when he mentions, he says that, say in theory, if I agree with you that Rian Johnson's effects are minimal, and I say I agree with you that it's a good thing to have minimal effects, why does that mean he deserves his own trilogy? Because that has nothing to do with story writing. That is purely the visual elements which are of a visual medium. But the important part of a movie is still the writing. I would put the writing ahead of how the film visually looks, because the visuals are just again, it's just a way of delivering that story.
The main problem I have is I don't believe a camera cut or a scene cut is in fact a special effect. I think it's just what you would do in filmmaking. So you can't say minimal.
Yeah.
It's there's zero special effects here.
I think that's pretty arguable too, actually. I could say it's borderline nothing and minimal.
Okay.
Yeah.
In 2018, Rian Johnson directed the music video / short film for LCD Sound System's Oh Baby. The video is about an older couple, played by the phenomenal Sissy Spacek and David Strathairn, who finally solve the formula, move out to the country, order the parts, build the machine, plug it in, and then...
That is almost painful for me, especially since a lot of the technology here implies some kind of looks like there's some kind of emitter being put out there, and I can understand not having some kind of teleporting portal thing, because it's kind of adding a bit to the suspense because you can't see this thing work exactly. But when the ball goes through and the way it's cut, it's the perspective specifically. You would see the ball enter the portal, like just from how the perspective is.
Yeah.
So like you would see the ball enter the portal before it from the other side of the portal as it's disappearing, and you would see it reappear on the other.
It's just implying that it's like Zen, where it's going to like a third space for a couple seconds and then it comes back. That's funny.
Yeah.
But it all just disappears and reappears.
Yeah.
But it's not, for the perspective doesn't make any sense.
Instead,
and how would that actually look?
Yeah.
So from their perspective, how does that disappear?
Yeah, the foreground door frame, it should not use that as like a cutaway. It should be in the middle between the two frames, and that's where the ball disappears. So we should see it in the shot in between the two platforms, and then it should also then reappear and replicate itself on the left. But instead, it just hides itself in the foreground. The
thing is, this isn't particularly a hard effect. We're talking about a small displacement effect. So you could create basically a height map ripple, just a couple of circles with an inner glow, and you just expand that in scale, and so it gradually disappears with transparency. I guess if we're talking in this instance, because we're using a displacement, you just have to make it dark over time. But that is a simple displacement. You could make it slowly disappear, and you have these ripples. That would look interesting, and it's quite easy to do. But I don't understand.
It's because when I'm real. It's like Wes Anderson. It's like the whole hipster thing. It's like the details don't matter. What matters is the emotion. What matters is how did it make you feel.
This is like the conversation we had about going to 88 miles per hour. The first time they just invented teleportation, right? It's like, okay, and this is all it is. Like, shouldn't there be a little bit more to it? Shouldn't there be like fire or things blowing up or things screwing up, or maybe they got the formula wrong or something like that? It's like, nope, everything's perfect.
Have the ball burning.
Right.
Personally, I would have made the ball, flaming and like shit. It's melted. It's scorched.
The only thing that makes it so that the effect is really felt is the fact that you have the dialogue between the two characters, upping the stakes and defining the props that are in front of them. So, like when he explains that it needs 1.21 gigawatts or whatever it is, it's like you understand that the jargon is supposed to be big numbers. It's supposed to be a large amount of energy. This is very dangerous. I might be crazy. You coming along, Marty? And Marty's like, oh, this is heavy. It gives you all of the emotional impacts. What Ryan is doing here is he's like, look at how cool this is. The ball is going through the hoop. And you're like, why is that impressive? And for some reason, hipsters gather around and they just clap at it. And it's like performance art. It's like all this weird avant-garde stuff masquerading as proper storytelling or mythological storytelling or a science fiction movie or whatever. It's not a science fiction movie. It's a hipster art film. It's not Star Wars. It's a hipster art film. It's not a time travel story. It's a hipster art film because that's what he cares about. He doesn't give a shit about what we know as genres or any of that.
So I can't remember what it is what part of Stargate it is exactly, but I remember in Stargate there was one shot in particular where the camera was dead on the side of the Stargate. So what happened was we saw, they were in the command room of the SGC, and the the gate room, and the camera slowly panned as the actor walked through the Stargate, and we don't see them actually physically step through you don't see the effect. There is no effect. We just see them step through onto one side. But the reason why that works is because we don't the perspective on the camera, we wouldn't see them actually step through, and because we don't see the effect, it makes it seem a lot more. It gives how sort of advanced and how fluid this transportation gateway is, because it's so easy. It's just from the perspective of the people going through the portal, and from the camera, it is just a step through. And that's why it works. But from the perspective here, it just doesn't work.
Do you remember in The Matrix when it's Neo's first time getting out of the Matrix and how they build up this setup for finding the lock on him so that they can release him from the virtual world? And the entire thing is built up around Morpheus asking philosophical questions about existence that the audience is obviously asking themselves in their own real life. It's also giving technical information about what is happening. And as that's happening, he's also giving narration about, oh, this could be bad. This is a sign. As the music cues pick up, as the editing gets more gets quicker, and all the tech, they start pressing all these buttons and alarms start going off. It's every piece of the orchestra being used in unison. It's your time to rest, bring in the strings, that kind of thing. What Ryan is doing is he's playing a cowbell and asking you to applaud. And I don't understand that. It's so frustrating to deal with, because it's like, here's the bare minimum, and I'm going to present it in a hipster way. Can I please get brownie points now? And then you have people on the internet saying, that's the guy that should be doing a science fiction movie about wizards and about big philosophical themes and swashbuckling adventures. Let's get the guy that just makes hipster movies. And I thought that he was going to adjust for the genre. And what I realized is Ryan won't adjust for anybody. And that's my problem.
Just like with time travel, pop culture has a lot of presumptions when it comes to how teleportation should look. And Rian Johnson ignores all of those, which results in my absolute favorite of his special effects. And that's because later in the music video, the couple's house gets broken into and Sissy Spacek's character gets shot. So her husband, actually, hold on. We'll get back to that. First, a real quick history lesson.
Okay, God. Just a question. What is with the ball? The ball that keeps teleporting on all the time?
It's a dodgeball. Like a rubber ball.
But no. But like, is it trying to reference like this film in particular? Because the ball's been there for a while now, just kind of bumping about on different graphics. Even before it showed the clip.
I have no idea.
Because the way it's going through this, like the lines, like let's say the pause lines, I would assume that he's trying to reference this.
For sure.
Lesson, super quick. Paris, 1896. Stage magician Georges Méliès is obsessed with this hot new tech called filmmaking. He's filming a busy...
Here's where we get to the part of the Gedelb where we have referenced some random dude and his technological advancement in 1500 AD and how he invented the wheel and art and how he's amazing and we all need to reference him and follow him or else we'll die. Anyway.
Street when the crank on his camera jams. You had to manually crank the film through the camera back then. He fixes it and starts filming again. But when he watches the footage back, at that moment his crank had stopped working, something magical happens. In the blink of an eye, a carriage full of people turns into a hearse. And that's how Georges Méliès accidentally invented one of the first special effects, the jump cut. This is an in-camera effect,
God!
Simply by stopping the camera,
so if you
changing...
I have to pause that because the idea that the jump cut was just like somebody fucking up with the frame is hilarious to me because I think anybody could just come up with the idea that you can just cut to something else. A jump cut is just, we're just cutting at the end of a scene and we're jumping into another scene. It's like ending writing does it, literature or theater. You just go da 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 da. We haven't reached the end of the scene yet. Cut. and then we go to the next scene, and we missed information, and then we just play off of that. This is so insane, but I'm gonna accept the anecdote. I'm sure that's how it was invented, guy.
Something in the frame and then starting the camera again. Sounds familiar. Méliès used this and other simple yet groundbreaking special effects in dozens of films, including 1902's A Trip to the Moon. For Méliès, filmmaking was a chance to do what he'd been doing as a stage magician for years: create magic.
It's fair.
Well, magic, I suppose, is an illusion of sorts.
It's
And
totally
what is visual effects but an illusion?
Yeah, it's fair to say that it's movie magic. That's everybody's been saying that, but that's like saying human nature. It's the container is so massive that I don't know how big it is. It's like saying an ocean is a pot of water. It's vast simplification. It's good. I agree using it, but once you get into the technicals of magic, the line alignment is very similar. It's sleight of hand. Look over here because I'm doing this.
I think we're missing the deep themes of the jump cut, because you see the cut ends so suddenly, like life. Life ends before it's the end. I don't know where the fuck I was going with that, but it was supposed to be a Mickey take.
Yeah, let's continue.
Symbolic of life.
As a philosophy nerd and a video essayist, I've learned that it is incredibly hard to successfully communicate a complex idea in a complex way.
What?
Sure, fine.
It's very difficult to communicate a complex idea in a simple way. If you're at a high level of learning, let's say you're doing trigonometry or what have you, you have to communicate in the language of whatever you're doing. So that's actually easy. It takes a while, but you are already at that level. To bring it down to a layman's term, that's hard. That's why we look at Einstein and how amazing his equation was when he came up with it. He explains so many things within a few characters. That's why it's beautiful. So complex to complex, no problem. Complex to simple, very difficult.
Agreed.
And it is 1,000,000 times harder to communicate a complex idea in a simple
Agreed. We just
way.
said that. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I would actually say that, communicate a complex idea and a complex is, well, it's not, maybe not easy, but still not particularly difficult. But I would say it's difficult to, as we said, it's difficult to complement a complex idea in a simple way. I'm just repeating what I said, but when it's a complex way, a complex idea in a complex way, it's literally just describing it or doing it in that complex way, because the complex way allows to. I don't know how I'm not getting my point across very well right now, but the idea of being complex is that it gives you more freedom to more room to explain it.
It's like when you talk about vertices and polygons and stuff, you could talk at that level. But when you tell a 3-year-old, hey, I'm going to make a spaceship out of vertices and vectors and magnitude vectors, and I'm going to spline this polygon in half. Like, you're doing all these things. Like, what the hell are you talking about? So you have to bring it down to a kid. And we totally agree what he just said. Like, we get that. It's totally fine.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so maybe I can bring it back to something which might be easy to explain. So let's say a tutorial. It's easy to put something complex into an hour-long tutorial.
Yes.
But it's difficult to put something complex into a 10-minute tutorial. Even just information in general is difficult to simplify down into something which has less capacity. And that is what I was trying to say.
Which you're assuming in a 10-minute tutorial that everyone will understand it when it won't. It won't be understood.
Yeah.
Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication, which is why I am so blown away by what Rian Johnson
Blown away.
The time travel, the force bond, the teleportation, every one of those effects could have been done.
Remember, guys, the force bond is not an effect. It's a camera.
Oh, dude, it's so cool that those effects could have been done 100 years ago. Fuck progression, bro. Fuck learning things.
Fuck technology getting better.
Ugh.
in 1896, and each one captures that same magic, the magic of filmmaking. When modern effects go for excess,
The magic of
Johnson's
filmmaking.
without much ceremony special effects feel more grounded and elegant and human. He boils the effects down to their absolute essentials. And doing that eliminates any distractions.
Distractions from
The
what?
effects communicate
From the movie? What are you distracting me from?
Not having effects is absolutely essential. Okay.
Hey, what's this guy's name again? What's his...
John.
John. What is the word that we are referring to? Special effect. It is an effect of something that's happening. You don't have the effect, then you're not emphasizing it. So I don't understand how you can make this, any of this statement. You don't want to boil something down to its absolute minimum. That just makes it starved. That's what makes it anemic, and that's what makes all of Rian Johnson's movies so unmemorable. Nobody remembers his Brothers movie, the ripoff of Darjeeling Unlimited or whatever. People only remember Looper and the Star Wars movie that he made because those were commercially successful. So that should tell you another thing. It's very dangerous for these art house director filmmakers to get so up their own ego once they make one successful film and think that that's proven their entire format, when the reason why they were successful is because they were cribbing off of something else, Terminator or Star Wars. And I see it even with my favorite directors. I love Nicholas Winding Refn. I think he's a fine filmmaker, but his best work was done for a commercial audience because that's what the audience actually wants to see. Unfortunately for all of us directors and all of us artists and stuff, the audience doesn't exactly want to see everything that we want exactly as we want it. It's more of a communal thing, and it's more of a mutual thing between us where like we make something that we both want to see. And I understand that you shouldn't just like make something for your audience, but you shouldn't fuck with them. You should not mess with your audience. You should give them exactly what they want because it's like ordering a pizza. It's a product.
Yep.
exactly what they want to communicate, putting that complex idea in its simplest.
No, but the thing is, a simple effect is not a complex idea. It literally is not a complex idea. It is a very simple idea that is even more in a simple way. Because it's not complex whatsoever to have a jump cut where someone just appears. That's not a complex effect by any means. It's a very easy and simple effect.
Well, some things should be...
idea of a complex effect, no way it applies to simplifying it down.
No, he's like, all right, I'm going to take a complex idea and simplify it, and that's why it's really clever. And I'd be like, that's great, except you're simplifying it to the point of us reading like a coloring book instead of a novel. The audience is smarter than these ideas. The audience is asking for more than these ideas.
So let's go over The Last Jedi. So the two effects he was talking about were the hyperspace ramming, which was not a simple effect, and the Jedi Force Spawn communication, which had no effect at all.
And I feel like that's attributed to George. It's not. I don't give Rian Johnson credit for. All he added was the fact that they can touch each other, and that's what he's hinging that entire little tiny thing on a giant idea of human.
Here's a super chat from Goose. Thank you, sir. You guys need to look deeper into the meta themes and the metaphysical along with metaphorical themes to sum it up using big word makes me look smart. What?
I like how it gets progressively dumber. The metaphysical themes, man. The metaphysical themes to me are the movie and reality. Like, I'm on a much higher level, and I don't mean that like egotistically or like scientifically, but like I'm really macro about this stuff. To me, the meta theme of a movie is not just the movie, it's the fact that the movie exists in our real world. Everything about the movie is the meta. So these people who are like, oh, the theme is about this and how it communicates this from the author. At the same time, those same people are talking about death of the author. And meanwhile, I'm stepping back and I'm like, I want to consider all of this. Let's look at it holistically. And that's what makes it so easy to pick these arguments apart, because they're like, they have a light in the dark and they're pointing at a wall with cave paintings and like, wow, that's awesome. And we're in a giant complex that's all lit up and we've already mapped everything out. And we're like, this is the caverns. Welcome to the tour. And then we have fucking rides inside. It's like, we're way ahead of this shit.
Form front and center in your mind, letting your imagination fill in the rest. I personally
What?
think that
Okay, letting your imagination follow the rest is probably not a good idea, and that's probably, I would say, along the same lines of modern art, in a sense. You know, the modern art which basically it says so little that it leaves it up for people to interpret. And that is not in any way skillful, because you're literally letting someone else do all the work. It's like how when people make up headcanon for a film to make, to try and repair it, you shouldn't. That's letting the audience do the work, and that's not any way accredited to your work on the actual film.
You also want to leave the imagination for things that you and really can't either, or things that you want to leave open to interpretation, like the ending of Inception or whatever, where he wants to.
I would say an example of that is Alien. So we don't see the alien's entirety for a lot of the film in the first film, and it lets it to the imagination, because in that sense it does improve it, because our imagination imagines something a lot more horrible than the kind of silly outfit they had the guy in.
And think about how many effects it took to get that imagination going. You had to have all of the set pieces with all the goop, and you had to have all the dark corridors, because those aesthetics are what build the visual world for the mind. The more you don't want to handhold your audience through the experience, but what you want to do is you want to present something that their mind can ease into. And when he says, "Oh, it lets the imagination fill in the gaps," I'm like, I don't want to do work when I'm watching this passive entertainment. This is not a role-playing game where I'm trying to imagine the world that I'm in with a bunch of people sitting around a D&D table. It's a movie. It's show, don't tell. You don't want to tell me and then have me imagine it. Write a book.
Trying to take that back to the minimalism. So when we talk about that, we're talking about, he's obviously trying to say, or we're trying to imply here, that in some way the minimalism effect. So like we're talking about like the minimalism of the alien to use imagination, and the minimalism of using transportation or time travel by just having someone pop. They are two completely different things, because removing information in horror, so the less information you have and the less unknown about a threat there is, but the more unknown of a threat there is, the more scary it is, because the more you know about your enemy, the less scary they become.
Yeah, but that's subjective.
But when it comes to
other people,
that's subjective.
But when it comes to this transportation or this time travel technology, what does removing the information really add?
It just leaves you with wanting something that isn't there. You want something fleshed out. You want a little bit more meat on the bones, and you're supposed to be excited about the gristle.
And I came up with a really simple, basic effect, which would have worked just as well. The idea of just having a white mask, have a mask outline of a person, and slowly disintegrate it into and revealing that person quite quickly. And that would still have the idea that it's an advanced technology that is, it's not, there's no flames to it, there's no lightning, it's not raw by any means, it's been refined.
I thought Tron Legacy did it pretty well. I like the Tron Legacy beam shoots towards the camera.
In forever.
It's a pretty good effect for what they did. And even the original Tron, because it's just involved. It's fun to watch. It's a visual spectacle. It's why we watch movies. It's not just the human connection or whatever these three things are.
Truly great special effects do one of two things: strengthen the emotional storytelling of the film, or ignite your...
I'm not sure this is exactly true. Let's think about this. So,
great special effects are just something that enumerates on the concept so that you can visually understand what's happening and enjoy it and be entertained by it.
I would say this point of visual effects is immersion. And so you're trying to immerse yourself in a world where you can't, obviously in the real world, you can't have giant spaceships, or even if you're bringing it to something that in real life, someone can't actually hire a military vessel, so they have to get someone to do visual effects to get it in.
Yeah, it's all about
the point
doing
of
something
immersion.
that you can't really do.
Yeah.
It's all about convincing you that something's really happening.
I think
But it's
Shiny's
not.
right. Yeah, that it has to. The effect is there to make it believable. And the only thing I can think of for your imagination is let's say you have like Babylon 5, for example. You have the warp gates or whatever they're called. They have this conal sort of corridor that leads to hyperspace, and we don't exactly know what hyperspace is. That will make me speculate. Okay, maybe it's another dimension. It's another world where other things are. But other than that, that's within the context of I don't know what it is, and the story doesn't tell me, and it doesn't really care to. So first off, we need that effect to make it look real or believable. And secondly, I don't really care about my imagination. I don't really care about speculation from Bob, who goes, that looks like a bullet, but it's really a laser beam. What if it was a plasma rifle shooting? Like, no, we don't care. That's
No,
not
we
the
want to
point.
know what it is so that we can talk about how cool it is.
Yeah, like
When it comes
lightsaber.
to-
Whoa, what is that? I don't know. It's a big stick that glows and it cuts through anything. Wow.
And then you can have that conversation about, oh, I think it's this. Well, I think it's this. Well, it doesn't matter what the conclusion is because you both already know that it's awesome. And that's the thing is like when we're having these Last Jedi questions, it's not fun. It's like a sad thing for us. Like, how does this work? It's a problem that's put on our feet instead of it being something that we can both unite and rally around and enjoy.
And it doesn't have to be
But-
an emotional thing either. It just could be, oh, that's cool. That looks stimulating. But I'm not like, oh, I got to get me a lightsaber. Oh, my God. Like, it's not some emotional urge. As people like to say that everything in a movie has to be an emotional reaction. It's like, no, it can make you think. It can make you sit back in your chair and go, oh, that was cool.
A good special effect, honestly, would probably be good even without the story elements, and that's a testament to the artistry.
So I would say, going back to what I was trying to say before, ultimately, the visual effects are not there to strengthen the emotion necessarily, and they're not there to necessarily ignite the imagination. They're there purely for immersion's sake. So you need, in a sci-fi world, you need to have these sci-fi elements to make it believably sci-fi, so you can immerse the audience in this other world.
Yeah.
Anything that is a fake version of a real thing is pretty much a special effect, unless it's a prop. It's like,
I still can't grasp this emotional aspect of like if it's a good
Yeah, I'm not
special
sure what he
effect.
means by that.
Yeah. Like when I think of emotion, I think of drama. I think of caring about a character.
That's got more to do with the actors, if anything.
well, he's saying like I could understand artistically, like if a good special effect would impact your emotions more, I guess have a little bit of sway, but it's not that's not what it hinges on. That's not it's not the whole thing. I don't know.
Think of a practical effect that's done with special effects. So I don't know, like a gun muzzle or something like that. You know it's a gun. You know a bullet's fired. You know it brutally murdered someone. Does that strengthen my emotion? I guess it was a shocking scene, so I'd be, oh, wow. But it doesn't ignite the imagination. I know exactly what happened. Someone got shot.
I think the key to a good special effect would be that you're presenting something to the point where people think it's realistic. It's that suspension of disbelief. It's the immersion.
That's immersion.
Yeah, it's Shiny said that. Yeah, we're all in agreement. It's all about making it believable. So,
I think that's
Fucking
that's
confused.
pretty poignant.
What
That's
is this
good.
guy on about? What is he on about? Ignite the imagination and strengthen the but the emotion is mostly within the writing and the drama of the story. It's mostly to do with the actors. It has nothing to do with the backdrop of what's behind these actors. That's just immersion.
Well, you can have, like, I imagine when you're saying that, you can have, like in Saving Private Ryan, where he's going to shoot the tank with the pistol, and it is, all the special effects are supposed to enhance the emotions because there's extra little details going off. There's specific hits there. But
ultimately, that's a backdrop. The visual effects are just a backdrop for the act.
I think that his point would be better is if he said a good special effect, like an exceptional special effect, would strengthen the emotions and ignite the imagination.
I
And
see
in that
the
statement, I would be like, yeah, but that's not what it's contingent on. A special effect is, like you said, it's just contingent on immersion. But I like the idea of the artistry of a special effect being tied to its ability to affect your emotions and ignite your imagination. Because I do agree with that. Like the lightsaber, it doesn't ignite our imagination. It does strengthen the emotions. But without the story, it's just a nice effect. and the effect is just supposed to be believable. External to the story, it's interesting, but in the story,
it's
it
not
has meaning.
purpose. I can admit that, you know, an effect can strengthen the emotion purely because immersion can strengthen emotion. If you really believe you're in this universe, then it can make you feel a lot more, you know, for this story. And I'll give you an example of video games are absolutely great for immersion. And when you're playing a video game, it can be so much more impactful than a movie. I've had much more impactful experiences in video games than I have within actual stories because of that immersion factor. But when it comes to strengthening the emotions, it is the immersion. But the point of the visual effect is not to strengthen the emotion; it's to strengthen. The point of the visual effects is to strengthen the immersion and not the emotion. But through strengthening the immersion, you increase the emotions.
Yes.
Here's a quote from someone you guys might recognize. Special effects are just a tool, a means of telling a story. People have a tendency to confuse them as an end to themselves. A special effect without a story is a pretty boring thing.
Thank you, George.
Well, I would say you can a special effect without a story. It's still impressive, well, at least technically, and it can look very. You know, you see these artworks, you know, these digital artworks on, I don't know, whatever page you look them on, cgartworks.com. That isn't a real website. Don't look that up. And then they have all these brilliant special effects where people have done stuff with fluid effects in Houdini. Then they've used OpenVDB to take them into Maya, and then they've modeled these like really intricate models. That is still pretty impressive, even though it doesn't have a story. It's not a boring thing by any means.
Yeah, you're blowing the door off. You're doing fireworks. You're exploding stuff. But it's what's funny to me is that most of the people that I meet in special effects are not really story people. They're more interested in the effect. So you have people that are more interested in story, and that's sure, I'm sure. But in general, what I'm saying is that most of the tech people that I've met in Hollywood are tech people and not narrative people, and most of the narrative people are not tech people. That's the general dichotomy.
You know, I'm glad I'm kind of here for this video because the biggest input I could probably give to this fucking Smudcast.
Well, we love your input in general, Shiney, so don't worry about that.
Yeah.
Or imagination. And Rian Johnson's effects do both of those things.
What?
Well, I'm sure they do for him.
I'm sure he's going to qualify.
Well, no, they cure cancer on weekends. I mean, depending what time of day, just, you know.
I'm sure he's going to qualify this, but he said the purpose of a visual effect is to do one or the other, and now he's saying they can do both, but he specifically said it had to be one or the other. So it doesn't make much sense to why you can have both, and we've already discussed to death how it's not necessarily to strengthen the emotion, and it's not there to do the imagination. I think the imagination mostly comes in outside of the story, so the story itself inspires you. You know, say the Star Wars films inspire someone to actually go out and do something, but the visual effects themselves may not necessarily inspire someone. Maybe they could inspire someone to go into the industry, but that's different to imagination, really.
Well, I like these things, but they're not important necessarily. But I do think that, you know, the dinosaur effect in Jurassic Park is pretty inspiring. Art is inspiring, but I think that this is kind of a silly
it's not inspiring. He's talking specifically about imagination. I know.
I mean inspiring in the sense that it's igniting the imagination, just superfluous amounts of words or whatever. But the thing I'm trying to get at here is that you could say this about every department. You could say that the costuming is supposed to strengthen the emotions and ignite the imagination. The camera is supposed to strengthen and ignite the imagination. The writing so this is a general statement that applies to everything. The craft service is supposed to strengthen the emotions and ignite the imagination. And if that's not true, then you have a boring craft service, you know, or boring catering. But this is not detailed information. This is not technical analysis. This is like cold reading.
I really want to see what this guy's going to try and say, or John's going to say about like how apparently Star Wars The Last Jedi does the visual effects in that both do a lot to do your imagination and strengthen the emotion. When specifically talking about the quotation mark minimalistic effects,
Right. And all we know from The Last Jedi was just bombastically huge when it came to special effects. So we're not sure where he's coming from yet. Let's find out.
The simplest, purest way possible. At the end of the Oh Baby music video, the couple's house gets broken into and Sissy Spacek's character is shot. Her husband picks her up, ties a string to himself and the teleporter's power cord, and carries her in.
Okay.
A heart.
but that wouldn't. But that
I don't know.
what?
I just keep
as soon as no, but we're not talking
let it
about
play
it in
out
the
because I
sense
don't know
of-
what's going to happen. I have no idea what the string means. Or
Well,
anything.
Turn off the
Well,
machine.
what I'm assuming is, the string will pull the cord, and when it pulls the cord out, it's going to stop teleporting. But from what we saw before with the ball, it's live teleportation, so it's not like in Stargate. So in Stargate, it sends things in packages. So it waits for the person to fully step through the Stargate before they get to the, it sends it to the Stargate. But here it was more explicitly shown that when you go through the gate, it's almost immediate. It doesn't wait for the ball to fully go through. It just sends the ball through.
Right.
So
Well, there's a
really
lag time.
person, but
There's a
really
lag
this-
time.
well, maybe, but really, this person the other half of them should be stepping out through the other side of the portal,
Right, but that's
and then
not
they
the
get split in
information.
half.
That's not the information that's given in this story, which is what he's saying makes it so poignant. Based on all the minimalistic, simple information about what we know visually, the ball has a little bit of time where it's somewhere else. And then thematically, what they're trying to say is that, oh, well, you're going to die, so we'll go to this mysterious new world together. I'm not going to leave you. Like, I understand every step of the way what he's
it's a
getting
new
at.
world.
We don't know what it is. The point is it's igniting your imagination. Do you understand how it connects with the...
Yeah, but that has nothing to do with the effect. That's just, what is this other world? That has nothing to do with the special effect, right?
And he's saying that you don't need special effect to have, you don't need all this spectacle to tell that story. All you need is the story. And to me, it's just condescending.
Right. The
Then
same
why-
example.
also,
I gave
why
you.
should you be bare bones? Why be bare bones? That's my question.
Well, part of it...
Why
part of
do
it,
the minimum?
Part of it I like from Rian Johnson's perspective in a John Carpenter sense, where it's like he came from starting with small movies and he's kept the sort of small movie mentality, not using that much to do this or that. And for a music video, you obviously don't have that much money to spend or whatever. But to me, the presentation makes it look shitty. It makes it look like a high school project.
Yeah, in all honesty, this is probably credible to something which I would see in the media department of my college. Not something which is particularly high budget, but there's a lot of thought going into it. And when it comes to more specifically the emotional part of it, which again, I don't agree that visual effects purpose is to increase the emotion, as I've basically said before. But how does having a minimalistic effect increase the emotion here? Because a lot of the emotion that there seems to be is with the fact that this man's losing his wife because she's been shot.
Well, he said earlier that it's the point of the minimalistic special effects is for it to get out of the way so that you're not distracted by wondering all these tech questions. You're focused on the story. And again, to me, I'm like, don't tell me to focus on this or that. Provide me with as much shit as possible that I can pay attention.
But right now,
'Cause
he's making us ask the question, what the hell's going on here? So he's actually opening up this door. The same example I gave with hyperspace in Babylon 5. Where are we going?
He just keeps doing it. He
We
does it
don't
over
know.
and over again.
Yeah.
And he's a looper. He just keeps looping the same thing over and over again.
So it's not about the effect causing imagination. It's just a mystery in the narrative. We don't know what's going on. And that's supposed to be romantic or something? Like, is that what he's trying to get
But
at?
even then, when I look at, for example, okay, so let's go to Star Trek for an example. When the teleportation, the transporters, that effect, we'll just arbitrarily take it. And it's like, okay, the transporters effect from Voyager, That
Yeah.
doesn't distract me. That is it's visually telling me that, this person is being taken apart and put back together, or at least this person is disappearing in one place and reappearing in the other, and there isn't any more questions there. It's if you had this person just pop out of existence and pop back in, it would have made it less impactful. It would have made the transporters. It wouldn't have made it more emotional. It wouldn't have made it
Right. There's at least 3 or 4 episodes I could think of Star Trek, even the Next Generation, that had stories based off transporter accidents, like Riker making a clone of himself, or people getting trapped in the matter stream, and making a whole story around that, where it's like, oh, my imagination about this piece of technology, but is there? But you know what? That's the point of science fiction. You're supposed to create these plots and worlds out of what if we had spaceships? What if we had lightsabers? What could we do with that? That's the point. So at this venue, you're like, okay, great. You're doing a science fiction story with this music video. You're doing a science fiction story with The Last Jedi. Great. What did you do, Ryan? Nothing. You literally just said, oh, pop into existence. What happened here? Oh, pop out of existence. Oh, what'd you do? What'd you do with Last Jedi? Oh, they're just talking right now. Like, that's nothing imaginative. I have no... where does my brain go from there?
Yeah, exactly.
I would
You have nothing to eat on.
Having impressive visual effects, in a sense, can... While it doesn't create imagination in the viewer, it shows an imagination within the artist. So, for example, take an example off the top of my head. Again, just go to Star Trek again. The wormhole from Deep Space Nine. It shows a level of imagination on the part of the writers and because the writers say, okay, I want an effect in this specific way, and it shows the artist's imagination of how they're making this effect and all the colors they're using and all the little things, the little details that are happening. And that isn't a distraction by any means. It's just a visual representation of what's happening. And this whole video just seems really weird to me because there's a lot of this is just wrong. And it's difficult for me to explain because I shouldn't feel like I have to explain things like this.
It's really comes down to that quote by George that this is all about the story, and the effect adds to the story. And if you have a story that allows you to speculate and think about fantasy elements in science fiction or the mystery aspect of a story, then great. Your imagination is going to go, what's going to happen? How does that work? Who killed this? Who killed Colonel Mustard, et cetera, et cetera. That's fine. But it's not as a result of a special effect, especially a minimalist special effect. That makes no difference.
Also, I just want to point out that I think this scene here, at least in some capacity, half of that person isn't going to be transported because it might not happen in the way of the front part. You said there is a bit of delay, so okay, I'll give that there is some kind of delay.
Yeah, but you know what? If they had
surely
a special effect,
surely the back of the person would still have just been cut in half. Yeah.
So if there was a special effect to show the thing powering down, and as they were walking through was powering down, and then they got trapped when it turned off, then be like, all right, there's some lag as opposed to electricity, which is almost instant. So
there's a visual representation, and they need the visual representation to actually tell something within the fucking scene.
So you would need like that ripple effect you were talking about, or a gate closing, and they steps through the gate, and the gate just closes, he doesn't keep going, and boom, that would do it. They'd be trapped in that world, whatever that world was, and that would do it. We get it. We know they're going somewhere, as opposed to, wait, did they just die together? Did they just go somewhere and get sliced in half and the transfer didn't continue? Like all these other stupid technical related questions, which aren't the point of what's going on.
For me, it created more of a distraction.
Yes.
The lack of the effects.
All these questions start popping up. All right, we're almost done.
Anyway, there's not much left, is there?
No, 2 minutes. We're good.
Breaking, complex, beautiful idea floating for an eternity between here and there, which particle effects and lens flares.
Why
will
is that
only
so
distract
complex?
from a complex beauty that you can only really achieve.
I thought it was a simple thing.
It's not complex. It's not
also,
complex
not,
by any means.
how can you say only distract? So then how come I can't say, oh, putting here and there on fence posts distracted from me figuring out the message myself, which would have made it more brilliant because it would be more subtle. Like, I can just fucking make up stuff too, dude.
It's painful. This is painful to watch.
Well, we're only a minute left, okay?
Through simplicity.
No reference to The Last Jedi, just a stupid music video. Wow, thanks.
Well, the reference to The Last Jedi was, what was it? The hyperspace scene and cutting between two things.
I don't understand. He said only again, only through simplicity. Like, really? That's the only way?
God.
Okay.
Hey, guys.
Okay, we're done. That's good. Oh, boy. John. We love you, buddy. But what are you talking about, man?
Wait, is his outro like a full minute and a half long?
He's given some message about supporting him or some shit on Raid Shadow Legends.
Yeah. We'll just avoid that entirely.
I would say my personal hell would be being trapped in like hell with videos like this that make such weird statements about something which I suppose is a lot closer to me than I suppose storytelling. Because while I'm passionate about storytelling, I suppose what I'm more knowledgeable about is the more technical aspects of visual effects.
Right.
So, like, summing up what I learned from this video, because I think I understand. The name how Rian Johnson does special effects is kind of fucking dumb, because it's just one point, really, which is that he's saying that the best way that Rian Johnson does things, and the reason why it's so interesting and so fascinating, is that he boils special effects down to the most simple thing so that you can get into the emotions of the story. And all I can say is that just sounds like you're a stan, like you're just a huge fan of him. There's nothing there that has anything to do with overall storytelling or special effects, or there was no technical details about it other than, hey, you can do a jump cut because this guy left his camera running and the crank wasn't going. Like, even though I'm sure people looked at hundreds of reels of film that had been cut for like that accidentally, or were missing footage and realized they had an impromptu jump cut. I'm sure he was the one that took advantage of it and made it into an effect. That's great. But it's so bizarre to me that the whole word is special effect. Special. It's not normal. It's something that requires a little bit more ingenuity. 2, effect. It's something that leaves an impact, which means it has to be noticeable in some way. Even if it's subtle or if it's hiding something, it's something that is present. So the idea of boiling that down to the minimum and making it simple is antithetical to the idea of what we're trying to do with special effects, which is present realism, which is present immersion, which is present what he was trying to say earlier, which is like ignite your imagination and have emotions. Obviously, you want to have a good effect. You want to have something that seems realistic, or you want to emphasize a little bit more, have an explosion that's bigger than normal, have your characters walking away slowly. You have options. I don't like this idea that everything is boiled down to only this or that, when the entire medium is about options, especially when these people are all about subjectivity and art. Like, let other people have their version then and pronounce it. This is like just, I like thing, and this is cool. Remember this guy from 1800? He did this thing. It's pathetic.
Here's a super chat from Punished Berserker. Thank you, sir. Why does this dude sound like he's about to climax? You know, John is just a very affectionate guy. He loves Rian Johnson so much. He made a video about it, and that's just his passion behind special effects that are also camera shots, I guess. I don't know.
It really does sound a little bit sexual, though. It's like, oh, I just love the way that Rian Johnson he just gets in there and cuts back and forth. Baby, jump cut me. I'm like, oh, geez.
Isn't jump cut the best special effect you've ever seen? It's so minimal. It's so minimal. It's not there.
Did you know that you can cut and then have a different frame and start it? I'm like, yeah, that's what we all learn when we're like 5 and we have the VCR and shit. Like, or we have the camera
People
in our
who
hand.
have Windows Movie Maker have managed to figure this out.
And it's like, wow, you know, he brought up a spectacular effect and then didn't talk about any of the actual details of it. It's just like the Patrick Williams video. Give no credit to anybody that's actually involved. Speak about no industry, no names of companies, no names of people, other than one reference that's supposed to give you academic, like,
I know
credence.
I know John likes to watch these videos. So, if John, you're watching, so when it comes to videos like these, you really need to explain yourself more and you need to reference things more. So you still haven't quite told us why having a bare bones minimal effect is improving. Like you said, the distractions, but in fact, it can sometimes be more distracting to not have this visual representation of. Again, it would be distracting to see Obi-Wan. Instead, if they didn't have Obi-Wan if they didn't have the ghost effect on him when it came to Empire Strikes Back, it would be confusing for the audience because he's no longer. They don't have him transparent. They don't have him glowing. He's just kind of standing there, and there's no visual representation to say he's a ghost.
I think
that's something you need.
I think that's a good.
I'm gonna make a zoetrope and spin it in front of these audience members, and I'm gonna be like, "Give me $5, each of you," and they're gonna be like, "Oh my god, how did you figure that shit out? It's so like quirky and archaic." I'm gonna be like, "This one guy back in the day, he was doing this thing," and I'm gonna just be like the coolest kid at the beta table.
Okay, guys, I think it's a good place to end it. Here's Andrew Clark's last super chat. Thank you, sir. This guy has an obsession with poetry. I guess hard to say. I'd have to actually look at all of his stuff to say that he's more of a poetry than prose kind of fellow. But he certainly likes to talk as if everything he says is very poetic, for sure. But that's
my biggest problem with this video is mainly John saying that visual effects are supposed to enhance emotion and spark imagination, and that's not really the purpose of visual effects whatsoever. Like, they can be a byproduct, sure, but that's not the purpose by any means. They don't have a status. So these little details they add in with visual effect, that's not to enhance the emotion. That's to ground the world and to make the world feel more complex and detailed, and that helps immerse people, which in turn helps the emotion.
I would say if you really want a good lesson on special effects, look up actual people that were the geniuses behind this stuff. Look up Dennis Muren, look up Phil Tippett, look up Roger George, who did Terminator stuff. Look at Tom Savini. Look at the Legacy Effects Company. Look at all these different companies. Sony Pictures Imageworks back in the day. Grant McEwen, the guy that did miniatures and built R2-D2 and all this stuff with some people. It's like there's so many people. They're all interesting technical engineers. They all have an interesting perspective on art and this kind of thing. And that's where you're really going to find information about special effects. And when you figure out that special effects, just like magic, is a tool set that you can learn, then you can apply it to your visions, and there's no restrictions once you understand what tools you have. You know how to set up a rain bar, and you know what the restrictions of that are. You know what the tube of death is. That's to create background smoke in a military scene. You know what kinds of options you have. You can look at the catalog and look at how much money it costs, all that stuff. And what's amazing about all of this is that that's just if you want to. If you want to be a director, you can do what Quentin Tarantino did and the advice that he got from Terry Gilliam. You don't have to know everything. You just have to know who to hire. And as we were speaking earlier about George, what was so magical about him was he was a headhunter. He found all the right people. The guy that invented Photoshop was one of the guys that was working at ILM for him and his brother, these geniuses, because he just brought all these people together. If we go down this path, like what John is saying here with Rian Johnson, we are going to stay in the dark age and the stone age of special effects. And we're never, as a group, we're not going to appreciate and we're not going to help foster the actual community that builds these effects and finds amazing ways to present things that none of us would ever think of. They come up with all sorts of things at the drop of a hat because of the way that their brain works. It's not the director.
I want to just give a little bit more advice to John. So John, if you are watching this, what I would recommend is before making a video like this, I would have someone who can actually be an authority on the subject of visual effects. There's lots of visual effects studios out there. I ended, late last year, I ended up finding a nearby visual effects house, and I got to interview them, which was pretty fucking great. And that I had no idea they were anywhere close, but that if there isn't, you can try and find a visual effects house, and maybe you could talk to them about this, and they can have a bit of an input, and that can help having someone on authority.
Call
and
them
even
up.
then, even if you don't have access to someone who's, I don't know where he lives, somewhere in America. Things are a lot more spread out in America, so maybe.
But you could just call him up. He could be like, "Hey, I'd like to talk to somebody at your effects warehouse. I'm a YouTuber. I'm doing research for something. Could you get back to me?" And maybe 1 out of 5 of the people that you get back will get back to you, and you'll have an infinite amount of knowledge based on what your perspective is now in comparison, which is 0. So you can go from 0 to 60 if you just talk to somebody, read a book. Just look up anything, get some knowledge before you start talking, and then we won't have to make these videos. Because this stuff really pisses me off, because this whole sector is something that you're like, oh, I love Rian Johnson, I love this, I love that. It's like nobody cares, and it has nothing to do with the subject. So please figure out the difference between actually understanding the technical knowledge and what it takes to get the stuff, what the story impact is, what the emotional impact is. Find stuff about that first. Stop making these copy pasta just right videos, because those are going to go out of style really soon once people start to get a little bit of actual knowledge about how films work. Then they're going to find out how big of a hack you are. Stop being a hack. Sorry, I had to wolf out a little bit.
Okay. Glib Wolf now. So before we had Wolf Paw, and now we've got Glib Wolf.
Oh, dear.
Just Punis Berserker. He had a super chat saying, "My advice to John before making a video: don't." I'm not good. John is, he's nice at least.
He's good at putting together this video. This is something better than I can't put together all this.
Look, John, make videos, but I suppose please don't make them in a vacuum. Even if you can't call up a visual effects house, even if there's not one nearby, I would say, contact someone online. There are Facebook groups and there are lots of forums where lots of professionals end up going for, just to talk. There are Discord groups, there's certain forums, there's Facebook, there's
CreativeCow.com is the best resource for prosumers.
There's lots of people who, if you can find them and talk to them, and I'm sure lots of them would love to have a chance to talk about this kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, you should shush me, big bro, little sis.
All right, guys.
Shush me in the comments.
I think we've given all our recommendations to John. I'm sure.
Yeah, I apologize, John. By the way, I don't mean to be like a dick about everything. I get passionate about my craft, and that's all. So I don't mean any ill will. I hope you do well in your career and in your path, and you find what you're looking for. Don't make content for intellectual Luddites, please.
Okay. Well, thanks, guys, for tuning in. If you have any other suggestions, join me on Discord. I have a suggestion channel there. Post your ideas. We'll be happy to get back to you. And have yourself a great day.
Yeah.